All right, back to the laundry list, 73 MGB. Now I figured the actual problems within the turn signals was probably within the front lights, and which actually they had bad grounds. But beyond that, there was a big old knot of electrical tape here, and I took it apart, and this is what we got. Somebody had soldered them right there at the end, and this one was broken off. So the other side isn't much better. And based on the condition of the housings, I thought I would look to see what was available. And currently, only the 69 and earlier lights are available, at least through Moss. So those took two separate bulbs, so we couldn't use those fancy new LED bulbs that he just put in them. So we haven't quite made a final decision on what we're doing with these. But then after getting the vacuum advance put in it and getting the front shocks done and finishing bleeding the brakes and all that stuff, went and took it for a test drive and found that it was rather sluggish in particularly third and fourth gear. Now, with the Stromberg, they generally do feel a bit on the sluggish side, but this was worse than it should have been. And get a mile or two down the road and I realize, you know, this thing has an overdrive in it. The overdrive is hanging, so once you shift into third, it automatically was just going into overdrive, and that's why it was so sluggish. So now what I got to do to prevent damage, because that, if your overdrive is hanging on and you put it in reverse, you can do real damage to the overdrive unit. So what we need to do now is I got to get underneath here, get it up in the air and check all the electrical stuff. Make sure that it's engaging the solenoid when it's supposed to and not engaging it when it's not supposed to. And if all that's looking fine, then I got to get into the transmission. Now the last time I had one do this was on Captain Oblivious's car. Exact same symptoms. We drained the oil out of it, took the sump off, found a couple small bits of, just a little bit of stuff in there, cleaned it out, put all new oil in it, and in his case, it's been fine, working exactly like it's supposed to for the last 5 or 6 years now. So hopefully on this car, for the owner's sake, that's all this is going to need. All right, so I got my multimeter set up here, hooked up to the wire coming off the inhibitor switch on the side of the transmission down to the overdrive solenoid itself. Now, in case you were wondering, the inhibitor switch is the one on the left side of the transmission, the backup light switch is the one on the right side. But we should only see power down through here when it's in the third, fourth gate, and with the switch on the steering column, in this case, on. So we're not in the third, fourth gate. Turn the switch on, the overdrive switch on and off. Nothing's happening. Put it in third gear. And then we got voltage. Let's pull it out of third gear. Back into third, fourth gate again. So electrically, everything seems to be working as it should. And it's not hanging and staying on. So it appears that our problem's probably internal within the transmission. So I drained the oil out of the gearbox and found that it had 80W90 gear oil in it. Now, I know there's some of you out there going to say, well, what's wrong with that? There's no problem with that. That discussion's all over the internet all the time. Now, 80W90 gear oil, viscosity is actually very similar to, say, a 30 weight oil, 2050. It's all overlaps pretty well, but it's a completely different additive package within the oil. And these things did recommend 2050 motor oil in them, And then the local guy that does the rebuilds on these things has always recommended non-detergent 30. And the guy that taught him always recommended that too. And ever since I had a discussion with him about oils in these transmissions, I've been sticking with non-detergent 30 myself. Now he told me he's seen quite a few of these over the years with 80-90 in it that would hang just like this one's hanging. So what he would do is change the oil, put non-detergent 30 in it, go drive it. Drive it long enough to get the transmission up to temperature. That's important. Get the oil to circulate through there, engage and disengage the overdrive, and see if it starts working like it should. And then change it again. Sometimes it'll take changing it twice before it starts working exactly like it's supposed to, and then change it one more time just for good measure before giving it back to the customer. So that's exactly what I did here. Because once I drained the oil, I cleaned out the sump, and the sump had almost nothing in it as far as any kind of metal flakes or anything else, very little of anything in it to get excited about. Pretty much what I would normally see on a service. So I put 30 weight in it, went and drove it. And it engaged itself again, which I wasn't quite sure because it just felt, I didn't feel it engage, but it just felt a little funky, and I hit a big bump and it disengaged after it was hot. I drove it for a few more miles and then tried engaging and disengaging it, and it started working and working exactly like it was supposed to. I engaged it, disengaged it probably 15 times without it failing to work properly. So now what I'll do is I will change the oil one more time before I give it back to the customer, and then tell the customer just be cognizant of what's going on and be sure that he understands whether or not it's actually hanging or not. But yeah, there's the overdrive issue solved on this one.